November 2021. Manchester United have just sacked Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. The Premier League's biggest club is in crisis. The dressing room is fractured. Cristiano Ronaldo, arguably the greatest goal scorer in the history of the sport, has just returned to Old Trafford, and his team is going backwards. The board asks their players, "Who do you want as manager?" And Cristiano Ronaldo, the man the world had spent 20 years calling the greatest individual the game has ever produced, gave them a name. Not a manager built to serve stars. Not a tactical system designed around one dominant forward. He asked for a coach whose entire philosophy demands that every single player, including the greatest player in the world, subordinates themselves to the collective. He asked for Luis Enrique. Manchester United ignored him. For years later, Luis Enrique won back-to-back Champions League titles at PSG without Mbappé. And Ronaldo's call looks less like a preference and more like the most underrated piece of tactical thinking in recent football history. The question is, why did Cristiano Ronaldo understand what Luis Enrique represented before anyone else did? Here is the thing about this story that most people completely misread. The moment Ronaldo recommended Luis Enrique, the media framed it as ego. Ronaldo wants a big-name manager. Ronaldo wants someone who will handle superstars. Ronaldo wants to be catered to. But Enrique's entire managerial history says the exact opposite. At Barcelona, he won the 2015 treble La Liga, Copa del Rey, Champions League, not by building the team around Lionel Messi, but by demanding that Messi change his game. Enrique told Messi to widen his position, create space for others, contribute to the collective press. He didn't ask, he told. And the result was that Messi, Suarez, and Neymar together scored 122 goals in a single season. The system didn't serve the star. The star served the system. Ronaldo knew that. He had spent 9 years at Real Madrid watching Barcelona's system work from the other side of El Clasico. He had seen, up close, what collective organization under a disciplined coach produced. He understood it better than the people making decisions at Manchester United. And here is the open loop in this story. If Ronaldo was calling for a collective system, what does that tell us about what Ronaldo truly believed, about how football at the highest level is actually won? Because it turns out that the man the world spent 20 years calling the greatest individual had understood the primacy of the collective all along. To understand what Ronaldo saw in Enrique, you have to understand the era of football they both came from, and the era they were stepping into. The 2000s and 2010s had been the age of the individual superstar as competitive weapon. Ronaldo at Real Madrid, Messi at Barcelona, the Galactico model. The idea that if you assembled enough world-class individual talent, trophies would inevitably follow. It was seductive. It produced moments of extraordinary beauty. And statistically, for about a decade, it worked. But by 2021, something had changed. Liverpool's 2019 and 2020 Champions League campaigns, built on Klopp's relentless collective pressing, not individual stars, had rewired the definition of elite football. The best team wasn't the team with the most famous players. It was the team with the most coherent system. Enrique had understood this before almost anyone at elite club level. His Barcelona treble in 2014-15 was built on a contradiction that nobody fully appreciated at the time. He had the best player in the world, and he managed him like a component of a system rather than the axis. Everything rotated around. When Messi dropped deep to create, when he pressed in the first 10 seconds after losing the ball, when he allowed Suarez and Neymar space, Barcelona became genuinely unplayable. That is what Ronaldo had watched from the other side of El Clasico between 2014 and 2017. That is what he was asking for in November 2021. To understand why Ronaldo's choice makes sense, you need to understand what formed him. Cristiano Ronaldo dos Santos Aveiro was born in Funchal, Madeira on February 5, 1985. His father, José Diniz, worked for the local government. His mother, Dolores, cleaned houses. The family was poor. Football was the way out. He joined Sporting CP's academy at 12 years old. He left Madeira, left his family, left his mother, at 12 years old to live in Lisbon in student accommodation, alone, pursuing football. His first weeks at Sporting's academy were difficult. He had an accent the other boys laughed at. He cried on the phone to his mother at night. He trained harder than anyone around him to compensate. That detail is not incidental. It is the foundation of everything Ronaldo became. The obsessive training regimen. The relentless drive to be the best. The refusal to accept limitations. He didn't arrive gifted and coast on talent. He arrived determined and built himself. At Manchester United under Sir Alex Ferguson, between 2003 and 2009, Ronaldo became a Champions League winner and the best player in the world. And Ferguson's United, for all its star power, was a collective. Ferguson was explicit about it. The team won. No player was larger than the club. Then came Real Madrid. 9 seasons, 450 goals in 438 appearances, multiple Champions League titles. But also, and this is the detail that matters, 9 seasons of watching the most successful collective system of his era operate at Barcelona under Pep Guardiola, and then Luis Enrique from the other side. Ronaldo never publicly admitted that Barcelona's model was superior. He didn't need to. His actions in November 2021 did it for him. Because when the moment came to choose, when the man the world called the ultimate individual had the chance to select the manager for his own team, he chose the coach who had beaten him repeatedly with the collective. He chose the man who had made Messi adapt his game to serve the system. He chose the man who, 5 years later, would win back-to-back Champions League trophies at PSG by doing the same thing without a single superstar at the center of the team. Ronaldo knew exactly who Luis Enrique was. Let's look at what Luis Enrique actually built, because the numbers tell a story that goes beyond the trophies. At Barcelona in 2014-15, Enrique's first season, he won the treble. That in itself was historic. But the tactical fingerprint was what made it extraordinary. He took a squad that had been drifting since Guardiola's departure. He had Messi, the best player on the planet. And his first tactical move was to tell Messi he was no longer the central axis. He pushed him into the half spaces. He demanded pressing from the forwards. He told his stars collectively, "You are components of a system. The system wins, not any one of you." The result was the MSN trio, Messi, Suarez, Neymar, combining for 122 goals across all competitions. 3 individual world-class talents producing their best football, not despite the system, but because of it. Enrique won 9 trophies in 3 years at Barcelona. Now cut to June 2024. Kylian Mbappé, PSG's record scorer, 256 goals, the man who contributed to roughly a third of all PSG's League One goals, leaves the club for Real Madrid as a free agent. The reaction from a football world was immediate. PSG are finished as a European force. Luis Enrique had a different view. The week Mbappé played his last game, a Coupe de France final victory over Lyon, Enrique stood in front of the cameras and said precisely this: "There is no substitute for Mbappé. We cannot replace him. Kylian's replacement will be the team." 14 months later, PSG beat Inter Milan in the Champions League final in Munich. They became champions of Europe for the first time in their history. Without Mbappé, without a single superstar at the center of the team, Ousmane Dembélé, in the system Enrique built, scored 33 goals and provided 13 assists across 48 matches in 2024-25. He won the Ballon d'Or. But crucially, and Enrique was clear about this, Dembélé was not PSG. Dembélé was an expression of PSG. The difference matters. After the Champions League win, UEFA described Enrique's side as having molded Paris into one of the great teams of the modern era. The language is telling. Not assembled. Not signed. Molded. Built. Engineered. And in 2025-26, they won it again. Back-to-back Champions League titles. Marquinhos and Willian Pacho at the back. Vitinha and João Neves in midfield. Barcola, Dembélé, Dewey, and Kvaratskhelia across the front. Multiple weapons, interchangeable, none irreplaceable, all collective. In a Champions League semi-final against Bayern Munich, PSG were down and fighting for a draw that would send them through. The image that went viral afterwards showed every outfield player sprinting back to defend a corner with their lungs on fire. No one standing off. No one conserving energy. The collective. All 11. A French journalist made the obvious comparison. The complete opposite of what happens in the teams where Kylian Mbappé plays. Enrique didn't need to respond. The result was the response. Now go back to November 2021. Go back to the moment Cristiano Ronaldo gave Manchester United name. He had watched Enrique do this at Barcelona for 3 years. He knew exactly what he was asking for. But here is the complication. And it matters. The argument this video is making is not that Ronaldo was selfless. It would be wrong and dishonest to frame it that way. Ronaldo's preference for Luis Enrique in 2021 was also, at some level, practical. Enrique had won with Messi. He had proven he could handle the greatest individual player in the world and produce results. For Ronaldo, who was 36 years old, returning to a struggling club, aware that his remaining years at the highest level were limited, a world-class tactical system was not an act of altruism. It was the correct calculation for winning. There is also a harder question embedded in this story. If Ronaldo understood the primacy of the collective, why did he spend 20 years operating as the defining individual superstar in football? Why was his own style demanding central, the unquestioned priority of every tactical setup he played in, so different from a collective model he reportedly wanted at Manchester United? The honest answer is that Ronaldo understood it intellectually before he was willing to accept it personally. He spent his career operating as the best individual player in the team and winning with that. But by 2021, at 36, having watched PSG fail repeatedly in the Champions League despite assembling the most individually expensive squad in history, having watched Luis Enrique's Barcelona demolish those same PSG teams, the argument for the collective was no longer abstract. It was the data. And there is one final complication. Manchester United rejected Ronaldo's advice. They hired Erik ten Hag instead. Then they sacked Ten Hag. Ronaldo left the club in December 2022. The relationship ended in public humiliation. Meanwhile, Luis Enrique went to PSG. He was asked to replace the most prolific scorer in the club's history with a system. He was told by the football world that it was impossible. PSG had been trying to win the Champions League since 1994 with individual stars. Every time, failure. Enrique said it would be the team. The team won it twice in a row. Here is the payoff. Ronaldo's call in November 2021 was not just a manager preference. It was a diagnosis. He had spent 3 years at Manchester United in his second stint watching the club try to compete with individual signings rather than systematic identity. He had watched Solskjaer assemble talent without structure. He had seen firsthand what happens when a club accumulates names rather than building a collective. He asked for the coach who had solved that problem. The coach who had taken the most talented individual in the history of football and made him serve the system. The coach who had said before anyone else that PSG would win the Champions League by replacing Mbappé with the team. The coach who was right. PSG won the Champions League in 2025. They won it again in 2026. Dembélé won the Ballon d'Or. A player who had been written off at Barcelona, who had been considered a talent in permanent waste, became the best player in the world because Luis Enrique built the right frame around him. That is what Ronaldo was trying to bring to Manchester United. And the most painful part of this story is not what Ronaldo missed, is what Manchester United missed. Erik ten Hag won the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup. He was sacked after 2.5 years. United finished the 2024-25 season in mid-table. They have not won the league since 2013. Luis Enrique, the man Ronaldo wanted, has 2 Champions League titles and 4 trophies in 2 seasons. At PSG, a club that spent 30 years trying to buy its way to European glory, the system won. Ronaldo knew it would. There is a lesson in this story that runs deeper than football. Cristiano Ronaldo spent his entire career being framed as the opposite of collective football. The individual, the ego, the player who needed everything built around him. And to some degree, that framing was earned. But the moment he had a genuine choice, the moment he could name the coach for his own team, he chose the man who had spent his career proving that no individual is bigger than the system. That contradiction tells you something important about what Ronaldo actually understood. That the greatest goal scorer in the history of the sport looked at elite football in 2021 and concluded, the system is the answer, not the star. The system. Luis Enrique's PSG proved it twice in succession. And Ronaldo, playing out his career in Saudi Arabia, watching from a distance, had said it before anyone believed it was possible. That is the story that nobody told. I'd like to know your view. Was Ronaldo right for purely tactical reasons, or was there something more strategic in the call? Tell me in the comments.